Hello, everyone. My name is Catherine Speglia, Associate Editor for the Manufacturing Group, and I would like to welcome you to today's webinar brought to you by Dude Solutions. Today's presentation is called Data-Driven Manufacturing, Achieving Maintenance Excellence. As you seek to improve your manufacturing operations, elevating your maintenance team to excellence is a process that involves a variety of best practices. But which ones are right for you, and how can you get started? Harnessing your maintenance data and turning it into actionable information is key. We'll help you feel equipped with actionable tools for operating in a more data-driven environment. In today's webinar, we'll discuss data best practices to create the most impactful improvements, a variety of metrics that maintenance teams should be measuring, guidance on what your goals should be and their impact for your team, tips on how to get started with more data-driven processes, and guiding principles for the best follow-through. While you're listening to the presentation, I encourage you to submit questions at any time by typing into the designated comment section on your screen. Following the presentation, we'll have a question and answer segment. Today's webinar will also be available on demand so you can view it again or share it with friends and colleagues. You will receive an email with a link to access the webinar within the next few days. Now, I'd like to welcome today's speaker. Paul Lachance has spent his entire career devoted to optimizing maintenance teams by enabling data-driven decisions and actionable insights. He currently serves as the Senior Manufacturing Advisor for Dude Solutions. I'll now turn it over to Paul. Enjoy the webinar, everyone.
Thank you, Catherine, and it's an honor to be here today. So today's webinar, Data-Driven Manufacturing, Achieving Maintenance Excellence. You already met me. My name is Paul, Senior Manufacturing Advisor with Dude Solutions. I've been in the maintenance management world since the mid-90s and have seen a lot. I've seen a lot of things that have done great, and I've seen a lot of things that have not been done so well. And I'm drawing on those experiences to share with you today. I'm going to start with some wisdom from 1865. This is Alice in Wonderland, a novel by Lewis Carroll. And I'm going to do a quote here. Cheshire Puss, would you tell me, please, which way ought I go from here? That depends a good deal on where you want to get to, said the cat. I don't care much where, said Alice. Then it doesn't matter which way you go, said the cat. A lot of maintenance organizations, if you're not running as efficiently as you feel you should, they kind of summarize by this. Do you have a destination? Do you have a plan? That's the key. That's the first thing you really have to be sure. Once you have that destination and once you have that plan, there's all kinds of information and metrics that can benefit you. So to use another analogy right now, say you do have a destination. Say you're actually driving a car. You kind of know where you're going. You're running really late. You're rushing. And you've just got to be there. You look down at your dashboard, and all you have are a couple of hard-to-read gauges. You really have no idea exactly where you're going. You can't see the map. You don't know if your engine is overheating necessarily. You're not even really sure exactly how fast you're going. What is the likelihood that you're going to make that destination? Information is key. Fast forward to a modern car screen, and not only do you have all kinds of alarms and sensors and gauges to tell you where you're going, you have a map that's showing you exactly where to go and where to turn. Your likelihood of getting to that destination is far greater. That information, those metrics, are key to your success. And that's what we're going to talk about today, is what are some of the key metrics I should track? What are best practices I need to keep in mind? And probably more importantly, what metrics can help me make sure I'm following those best practices? What are other maintenance teams doing? And how can I avoid double downtime? Just a couple of quick slides about Dude Solutions. Dude Solutions, we've been around for 20 years. We just celebrated our 20th anniversary. We've been in the maintenance management software space this whole time. A lot of clients, a lot of experience around this. We have customers all around the country, all around the world. And a lot of the screenshots I'll be showing you today are our CMMS system, our computerized maintenance management system called Asset Essentials. Basically the tool that will help you get to that destination and help optimize your maintenance operations. So let's start with the question, what do maintenance people do? I often, you ask people who really don't understand what maintenance people do, and it conjures up an image of, unfortunately this is not like it used to be, but it conjures up an image of a grimy person coming out of a basement office. They only show up when things are broken. You don't want to see maintenance because something is probably going wrong. They fix it and they go back to their office, and not to be called until there's another crisis or another problem. In reality, what maintenance people do is increase organization and production capacity. For example, let's just say business is good. You're producing your products. You're not able to keep up with demand that sales is putting on you. So you can go to more shifts. You can expand your production lines. You can do a lot of things. Or you can increase from an 89% uptime to a 94% uptime and do the same thing a heck of a lot more affordably and easier on your organization. In reality, maintenance people are integrated with many departments. They're integrated with safety, production, engineering, finance, or they should be. And if they're not, that's something you want to take a good look at. In summary, maintenance people are critical to an organization's success and growth, just like any other key department in your company. Some of the best practices, to improve your maintenance operations, to look at these metrics and this data, it's a process. If you want to answer the questions like where are you trying to get to, how are you going to get there, you're ever completely there, what data can help you achieve your goals? As a CMMS software vendor, it's not just about the software, it's also about getting the software properly implemented. So if you're going through this webinar and you're thinking to yourself, I have no clue how to get to what you're talking about today, you need to find a CMMS software vendor who can not only provide the software, but some of the experience and services to help get off the ground. We believe in this APA model, and it's all about assessing your goals and objectives, prioritizing, making a plan. This is a continuous improvement process. It takes a team, and part of that team is to identify what are your goals, what are your objectives, what are your pain points. These are key. To talk about metrics is irrelevant if we don't know what those are. So when you take a team, the team is not just, say, management. You want to interview the appropriate people in a variety of managerial roles. What are your goals and objectives from an operations standpoint, from a financial standpoint, from the IT department standpoint? What are your maintenance team, your supervisors, the technicians? Where are their pain points? What are their goals and objectives? The metrics are going to vary. The data that you're going to need to see is going to vary depending upon what role these people have in the organization. That grid on the right, you can barely read, is a list of possible metrics. And I've got probably 10 more pages of these metrics. Nobody wants to just see a ton of metrics. You want to see the metrics that are appropriate for you in your role in the organization. And they are going to vary. So we're going to go through a couple of sort of standard areas today and cover sort of different areas that are sort of common to most organizations, and to try to hopefully drum up some ideas about areas you should be considering. We'll start off in this first one, worst offenders, bad actors is a phrase that I often use. And the chart on the left, that KPI, key performance indicator on the left there, is a good one. It's the ratio of preventive to corrective maintenance. So what is my preventive maintenance ratio? Am I getting, right now that line is showing me I'm at a 60% preventive and the balance would be corrective. But my target is 80. That's where I get into the green. I want to be 80% preventive and 20% corrective. And don't be concerned if you're at the other end of the spectrum right now. Wherever you are in your organization, in terms of your ratio of preventive to corrective maintenance, you want to set a goal probably to improve, unless you're already at this 80, 20, 90, 10, the high levels here. But you want to set a goal and you want to track that. If downtime is an area that's it's hurting you, the charts on the right-hand side, you see that orange arrow. Lack of lubrication is contributing 47% of our downtime. That tells me a lot. If I can see that right in my face, as a maintenance supervisor, as a director of operations, whatever it may be, we need to be looking at our lubrication practices and figure out why that is contributing so greatly to our downtime. So you can step through, like there's all kinds of ways. Again, these are some more downtime-oriented charts. A good CMMS system is going to show you these, and depending upon your role, it should give you that information that you need to see. Another example of bad actors, this is called asset lifecycle analysis. And there are two assets that we have highlighted there, the air handler unit and the boiler unit. Each of these assets has a grade, A to F, just like school. The air handler unit's got a grade of a B. That air handler, if you kind of train your eyes across that row there, it was purchased in 2002 with a 10-year expected life. It's years left. It's actually older than we thought this asset was going to live. It's outlived its expected life. That's why the years left is in red there. However, those two event factors and trend factors right next to that grade of B on that air handler are both in the green. They're both good. And I'll explain why. But this asset, despite being an older asset, it's actually performing rather well. I'll show you why in a moment here. The boiler unit, right after that air handler, has got a grade of a D. It's not doing as well. Even though its years left is in the green, this asset theoretically has 3 years and change life left in it. So in theory, you'd think this asset should be doing pretty well, but it's not. Their event factor and cost trends are in the red. How do we know this? Well, when you analyze these good and bad actors, this actually is a good actor here. This is the air handler unit that still has expected, this is an older asset. But if you look at the cost trend, the chart there, that line chart with the orange arrow pointing at it, it's leaning down. And that's actually a good thing because the costs have been going down for this particular asset over time. The number of days between events, the lower line chart, is getting better. It's expanding. The number of days between failures is growing or expanding. That's actually a very good sign. This is an older asset, but its costs are decreasing, and its frequency of failure is actually getting better. The boiler unit is not doing as well. Its costs are rising pretty consistently, and its frequency of failure is getting worse. It's failing more frequently. Remember, this is a newer asset. So when you look back at this chart here, and you can see the air handler unit getting a grade of a B, the boiler unit getting a grade of a D. If you're getting ready to do, say, capital expenditure planning for next year's, in this case here, these are HVAC assets, but think of any assets, and you're thinking, where should we earmark some of these precious dollars we need to spend? If you only base things on age, and you're not even looking at this chart, and you think, wow, that air handler unit's a dinosaur, we got to think about replacing that thing. The reality is it's the boiler unit you need to look at. It's a bad actor. It's got issues. Does it need more preventive maintenance? Is it a contractor issue? Likewise, conversely, I would buy that air handler unit again. I would renew the contract if it's a contractor, or I would pat the backs of the men and women who are maintaining that asset because they're doing a great job. So having data, having metrics, having this information can help you identify this type of help you identify this. I'm going to turn this over to a poll question. We have a couple of poll questions today, and you should be seeing on your screen a poll question sub where you can answer this. So the first question that we have here is, how much backlog do you have? Backlog is the concept of work orders. How far backed up is your maintenance in terms of weeks? How long will it take you to clear every work order you have? Less than a week, between 2 and 4 weeks, between 4 and 8 weeks, more than 8 weeks? Or if you don't know, that's fine. If you can't measure it and you don't know, that's fine. Just answer what that is. So we've got some surveys coming in here. I'm going to let people take another moment here to answer those. I still see a few coming in, so I'll give everybody a little bit longer. Okay, I think we've got good representative response here. We can that'll get broadcasted so you can see the results. And the results are interesting. First off, I appreciate everybody being honest that they can't measure or they don't know. Hey, that's one of your goals and objectives, is to be able to measure these kinds of things. But we also see, we've got a pretty even distribution. Fortunately, we don't have a lot of people that are out beyond the 8 weeks, which is good to see. Okay, I'm going to go back to my slides. So you should be able to see my slide. So backlog. Again, we talked about backlog. Backlog is measuring your work. It could be corrective maintenance, preventive maintenance. How far off are you? And you really should be able to measure this, and not only measure this, optimize and find that sort of sweet spot for how far your backlog is. Is it super short? Or is super short necessarily good? Maybe it is if you're really on top of things, but maybe it's not. If it's super short, are you possibly overstaffed? I know that's not a very common thing to hear, but it's possible. Or are you making sure you're getting a healthy dose of preventive maintenance work orders in your backlog that will help eliminate the emergency and corrective maintenance work orders? But anyway, I'd rather see it short than long. If it's long or super long, that's almost always bad. You're probably understaffed. You're probably in firefighting mode most of the time. You don't have a healthy dose of preventive maintenance that are helping you avoid those situations. Likely related metrics that drive backlog to be lengthened. First off, if you don't have a proactive maintenance as a culture, if you're in that firefighting mode, and again, if you're in that mode and you're on that call right now, that's okay. You got to admit it, and you got to start working towards improving that. Do you have strong labor availability with the right skill levels, working on the correct work orders? Do you have your inventory when you need it? No matter what, you got to dig deeper, especially if you're trying to reduce a too long of a backlog. So there's all kinds of data, metrics, information, reports, and analytics that can help you fine-tune and optimize where your backlog is. So for example, and these are taken right from our Asset Essentials CMMS system. For example, when I log into my maintenance system, whether I'm a technician or a supervisor, I can see right away exactly how many work orders I'm working on, my team is working on, what are corrective, what are preventive, how many are overdue. It should be right there in your face so you know exactly what people are working on. You can put a dashboard object, it's highlighted on the right there, backlog work order summary, where you will see all your work orders that are open and not completed that are still there, and you can see it by priority, or you can see it by who they're assigned to, or you can see it by the category of work orders, or whatever variation you want to see. Again, if you think back to that process of the goals and objectives and the pain points, through those discovery process, you'll learn how you should be looking at this. But at the end of the day, you want to make sure you set these up as KPIs or charts right on your dashboard. When you're looking at your backlog and you see all of the work orders, this is a screenshot of just a list of all my open work orders. And when you look at them, what we like to do with Asset Essentials is to think beyond just the simple prioritization of a work order. A lot of people will call work order priorities emergencies. A good example that I like to use is, let's just say the restroom right next to the staff break room is broken. And if somebody makes a work order, which they should, but they call it an emergency. The reality is there are probably 3 or 4 other restrooms that are within a very short walk of where that broken one is. Do we want that bathroom fixed? Of course we do. Well, somebody else makes a work order that's called an emergency because a critical asset is not operating correctly, or worse yet, it's down. So they're also calling that a higher and emergency priority work order. What we do in our product here is we take a combination of the priority. You can kind of see there, that column is a little bit highlighted there. And then to the right of it is the asset criticality. So you take in a combination of the priority of the work order and the criticality of the asset that's being worked on, and we can calculate, some people call it a RIME index. We call it calculated criticality. It's essentially the same thing. The lower the number, the more essential that work order is going to be. And what happens is those highlighted work orders are actually outranking higher priority, just by the straight work order priority, work orders. Why? Because those assets are just more important to my operation. So if you can intelligently look at your backlog so that you're addressing the correct work orders in the correct priority, these kinds of metrics, this kinds of reporting or analytics can be extremely helpful for optimizing your maintenance operations. Our job planner is another example. If you look at your team, the top part of there where you see all that green and orange and red. I can see all my teammates. I'm a supervisor. Those are the people on my team. I know how many hours they can give me. I know how many hours they're scheduled to do. I can see if they're overutilized or underutilized. The bottom half of that screen is sort of a scheduling tool where I can move things around. I can swap people in and out. It's a variety of things I can do to help me fine-tune and make sure that my people are used correctly. Some people are not overworked, or if they're overworked, they get balanced out with other people. The tools like this can help optimize your backlog. The next example I want to use is to avoid stockouts. Stockouts are profit killers. A stockout, if you're not familiar with the phrase, is I don't have the part I need when I need it. You've all been there where you have an emergency work order on a critical asset, everybody's screaming to get it fixed, and you go to fix it and you don't have the part. Those are terrible situations. Nobody wants to be in that situation. And at the end of the day, you want to avoid those, but it really comes down to your ability to plan and execute your inventory management processes. So you got to have good inventory control, not only in the storeroom about physically how you're organizing them, but in your computer system, in your CMMS system. You have to have a good process at how you're using it. Do you know the parts you need? Do you have the right part at the right time and at the right price? If you mess this up, stockouts will absolutely lengthen your backlog. So there's a variety of ways we can look at that in a CMMS system. So it all starts with good inventory processes and planning. This screen right here is just a summary of the parts. And all of my parts in the system, where are they stored? You know, they could be stored in lots of places, and they should get rolled up. And you need reorder points on all of those, and so on. But you should know exactly where those parts live, all the way down to the row, aisle, bin, shelf, so that I can quickly locate that part if I need it. What vendors I buy them from, et cetera, et cetera. But you have to eventually get into the point where you've got your parts in the system. Once they're in the system, then you can do a heck of a lot with them. For example, when you define your preventive maintenance routines, and that's what this screen kind of is. It's the scheduling aspect of a preventive maintenance routine. On the right-hand side near the bottom, that yellow highlighted box there, those are the parts that I'm going to need for this particular PM when it comes due. So every time this PM comes due, I know as a technician, right on my mobile device, right on the printout, whatever it may be, I know exactly the parts I'm going to need to use. And you can even take it to another level. Say the PM says to change a filter. You know you're going to use that filter, if that's what the PM is to do. Well, you can have the system automatically take that part immediately out of inventory because that's what you're doing. Some cases it says inspect the filter, change if necessary. So maybe I'm not going to automatically dispatch. I'm going to manually dispatch that part if I need it. Just-in-time ordering processes where I'm going to order the part in advance of when that PM is due. Or maybe I'm going to just reserve the part. At the end of the day, you want to have good processes. The little report on the left-hand side shows you a list of all the parts you're going to need for the upcoming PMs. If you employ a job planner, a maintenance planner, these types of metrics, these types of reports, these types of analytics become really essential for them to improve the way they do their job. I also just need to know, what do I have on hand? If I'm on an asset and I'm working on something and I need a part, I should be able to look up that part really easily. How many do I have available? Are there some reserved? Is there back ordered? Quickly and easily see that. If I'm low on parts, the left-hand side there, it's highlighted. If I'm low on parts, show me, and we do this right on the dashboard. When you log in, put a dashboard object, a metric, whatever you want to call it, that shows you what parts you're low on. You can have it automatically email you or automatically create a requisition for those parts that you're low on. So again, for you to avoid stockouts, which are a profit killer, you just need to have this data, these metrics in your face to make sure you have those parts at the right time and at the right price. Example number 3, the 80-20 rule. So the 80-20 rule, if you're familiar with SMRP, the Society for Maintenance and Reliability Professionals, an excellent organization, they state in their best practices to be quote-unquote stable, you should have an 80% proactive, 20% reactive ratio. That's considered quote-unquote stable. In real world, I have not found nearly as many people at that level. So if you're on this call and you're thinking I'm not there, that's fine. But that's what SMRP calls stable. And let me tell you, when you talk to organizations that get to that 80-20, they are the smoothest running, happiest maintenance departments you're probably going to ever see. Even better, what's considered world-class is 90-10. So those are targets that you want to really look at. You got limited time to get your work done. You got to interact with your production people, the production schedules. You really want to be able to organize and track where you're at with this stuff and measure the results that you're doing. When you're in reactive mode, you better make sure you got the right people for the job, the right tools, the right parts. Also, if possible, this concept of no double downtime or helping avoid double downtime, it's also called pit stop maintenance, is the concept that, let's just say you've got an asset that's down, it's an important asset, and you're in firefighting mode. The really forward-thinking, cool under pressure maintenance supervisor will say, all right, we'll get our best and brightest to fix that problem. But you might also be able to knock off some PMs that needed to get done while that asset's down, as long as you're not going to extend the downtime. But that's pit stop maintenance. That's avoiding double downtime. Because, hey, if the asset's available and down right now and you can change that filter or you can do that lubrication or whatever has to happen, get it done while you can. So it's just another way of looking at it. And there's tools in CMMS software to help you do that. And then the other thing you can really help to move you back into a higher ratio of proactive to reactive is to think about a predictive, a PDM strategy to take advantage of things like IoT, for example. I'm going to go to another poll question. So this is going to show up on your screen. Poll question number 2. What best describes your ratio of proactive to reactive maintenance? Are you at an 80-20 or greater, I guess? Are you 50-50? Are you 20% proactive, 80% firefighting mode? Or are you complete firefighting mode? Or if you can't measure or you just don't know. So I'll give everybody a chance to try to answer those questions. And just like last time, I'm gonna let people have a couple of moments here to read the questions. All right, I think let's give it another minute, another couple seconds, I mean. Yeah, and this is good. So why don't we go ahead and we can show the results to the audience. Number one, there are some people on this call today who are at the 80-20, and they're probably nodding their heads. You can't hear them or you can't see them saying that, yes, we are in a better place as a result of that. Kudos to you. The rest of the group is much more in line with what I see in the real world, especially before they take on a serious attempt to get a CMMS system implemented, which is key to improving this. And then there's some of you guys out there who just can't measure, which again, hey, that's part of the process, is to look at, hey, this might be one of our goals and objectives to not only be more proactive, but to measure it, because you can't fix what you're not able to measure. So the good news is you've got a starting point of where you're at now, and you're going to start to think about where you can improve and measure that improvement. All right, I'm going to move back to my slides. So hopefully you can see my slides again. And so one of the absolute minimum required metrics, KPIs, whatever you want to call it, that you should have is your ratio of preventive to corrective maintenance. It's a super easy thing to measure. Any CMMS system should be able to provide this to you. This is in the form of a key performance indicator. We talked about it a little earlier because we showed it, but that little line, it's pointing to the 60. So that's where I am right now. I'm at a 60% I had set goals that I want to be 80. That's where it starts green, is when I get to 80. Anything less than 80, I'm below target of where I am. Those of you on the call that were on the other end of the spectrum, hey, if you were at a 25% preventive and 75% reactive, you might want to set your goal at the beginning. Why don't we think about a 35% proactive? You want to set expectations that are achievable and not too overwhelming, because you can always increase that. And it's just a matter of changing what your targets are. But you really need to be able to see what is your ratio of preventive to corrective. That is a metric that I think every organization can benefit from seeing. You also want to look at some reporting and analytics around visibility into your schedule. This is a picture of a monthly schedule of all the preventive maintenance that's up and coming. Show this to your production supervisor. Make sure that you're going to be able to get access to these assets when you need to get them. And if not, you'll have to adjust. But having reports like this and coordinate with your other departments where appropriate can be very, very helpful. That job planner that we just talked about as well in the backlog area is also very helpful in getting you closer to an 80-20 ratio. Knowing who your people are, who's underutilized, who's overutilized, match up their skill sets, move them around appropriately so that you are working on the correct work orders in the correct order. For the pit stop maintenance or the avoiding of double downtime, again, I know it's kind of a foreign concept for a lot of people, but if you're cool under pressure and people are freaking out because you have a major asset that's down and they need it up, if you're cool under pressure and you know you've got your best and brightest focused on that, you can then easily pull up, whether it be from your mobile device or from the browser, you can pull up that asset. You can see that press brake is highlighted on the left. And then one click later, show me all of my preventive maintenance work orders that are queued up for this particular asset. And you can look at that list and you can say, you know what, we could easily knock off that filter change, or we could easily knock off that lubrication while we have that asset. Get it done. And avoid the double downtime of having to ask to take that asset down at a different time. So it's just another way to look at optimizing your operations and moving back towards a more proactive mode. So the last example is, we call this dude intelligence. And one of the things I always like to talk about is, I've only shown you kind of these three groupings, those first three examples of fairly common areas: work order backlog, stockouts, 80-20 rule. There are so many other metrics and reports and analytics and KPIs. You want to make sure that you have access to really good reporting and analytics to look at that data. Now, you may not be ready on your own to weed through that data, but partnering with a good CMMS vendor will help you with that goals and objectives conversation, identify those. But you should just have access to things like heat maps and downtime summaries and all kinds of different reporting, aging reports, average days to complete, things like that, because those are going to, you can't fix what you can't really measure. Once you identify what you want to be able to fix, once you start to make a plan, a destination, what you want to do, that's where you really need to make sure you have those metrics, those reports, and those KPIs. And a tool like Dude Intelligence, which really is taking reporting to the next level, ad hoc analysis, multi-site analysis, peer comparisons with your brother and sister facilities within your organization. There's just different ways of looking at and measuring where you're at to help you say, am I on track? Am I on goal? And if you're not, well, you better maybe re-examine what you're trying to do. So as I said at the beginning of this presentation, and we're on the home stretch here, by the way, this is the last slide. We'll have another poll and a time for Q&A after this. But when I do these presentations, oftentimes if there are people that are looking at this going, man, I don't even know where to begin. I'm overwhelmed. I don't know where to start. Or maybe you're on the other end of the spectrum where you're starting to think, I'm in a good place on the 80-20, but I am sure there are other areas I can optimize. You always want to come back to this concept that, number one, your CMMS partner should be able to help coach you through these conversations, train you on how to get to that next level. And if they're not doing that and they're only just throwing software at you, you really need to look around. But you should be able to answer the questions, where you're trying to get to, how you're going to get there, are you ever completely there, what data can help you achieve your goals. And that's where our continuous improvement, we call it the APA model, where you assess, prioritize. You're not going to get everything done at once. Make a plan. And when you make a plan, that involves making sure the software is configured to help you achieve that plan. And part of that is establishing the appropriate metrics and reports and KPIs for the different people who will be looking at this information. You start to execute that plan, and before you know it, you're going to start to see improvements. Once you start to see those improvements, you know what? You can maybe start to pick the next thing you want to improve on. And it's a circular, continuous improvement process. And that's what we do, is to help coach our clients not only through the great software we have, but through these services. So I want to go ahead and throw up a final poll question for those of you, and then just take a second to answer that one. We're not going to publish the results. It's just if you like more information, if you could just indicate on there, and we can have somebody reach out for you to do that. While you're taking some time to do that, answer this poll question. If you have any questions, this would be a good time to type them into the question chat area that was described at the beginning. There should be an obvious place for you to put that in. And then we're going to go ahead and take some Q&A for the remaining time here if we need to.
Thank you so much, Paul. Yeah, I can get started with the question and answer segment.
Awesome.
Our first couple of questions are a bit of clarifying questions. So we have one question that's the 80 and 20, is that tasks, time, what unit of measurement is this? I believe you said percent, but if you could just clarify a little bit.
Yeah, that definitely is, again, a good CMMS system is going to allow you to measure it in quantity of hours and so forth. The one I was showing, and the one that I think is a mandatory for everybody's dashboard who focuses on this stuff, is percentage. What percentage of my work orders are reactive to corrective? But you can then argue, okay, percentages can be really skewed if the number of work orders, percentage based on number of work orders. It can also be percentage based on the hours of the work orders. That's probably a more appropriate one to do there. Again, you got to make sure you're taking the time to do it. So to be clear on the question, the answer is you should be able to do it in any of those ways. In our system, you can certainly do that, is to measure it as either a ratio and quantity of numbers or hours.
Okay, great. And I believe this question is in reference to what you were saying about double downtime. But when you say queued up, do you mean PM work orders already generated, or those scheduled to be generated in the future?
That is a really good question. The word queued up, there's a variety of strategies for how people will approach preventive maintenance from a CMMS system. Broadly speaking, I'll put it into two categories. One is the PM generates on a Monday and says, just get it done when you can. There's no expected date, or it just sits in your list of work and you just kind of knock off your to-do list one at a time. It's maybe a lesser intelligent planning way to do it. Other organizations, especially if they employ a job planner, will think a little bit more from a scheduling aspect around that. So you may have the PM generate on a Monday, but have the assigned date not be until Wednesday and the expected date not be until the following Wednesday, so that you have grace periods to get it done. And I find that if you really want to kind of take your preventive maintenance scheduling to the next level, you should employ good scheduling best practices around that. At the end of the day, when you look at the list of work orders that you need to get done, it should be very clear to you what are due now, what are due next week, and have some sort of a reference about which ones you should possibly be doing. But my simple example today was, and it doesn't necessarily have to be preventive maintenance work orders. You might have had a corrective maintenance work order that you were just waiting to get to. Maybe it's some sort of an alignment issue or something that the asset's still functioning. It's not 100%, but we need to get to it eventually. You can knock off corrective maintenance work orders at the same time, but the quote-unquote queue is a list of work orders in an appropriate list order. Again, the more sophisticated job planner, scheduling person will take advantage of the scheduling aspects of the CMMS system to do a more appropriate view of that. I hope that makes sense.
I think so. We'll see. Okay, does your CMMS tie into a variety of ERP and MRP systems, and also what are the pros and cons of tying into any ERP system?
Yes, of course. Integrations, interfaces are essential in this day and age, whether it be ERP, whether it's IoT, or any place that data needs to be shared between your CMMS system and your other essential business systems. So when you look at integration, there's a variety of ways integrations can happen. We have connector tools, we have APIs, we've done a number of interfaces to a number of different systems. In the ERP world, typically it's around the purchasing aspect. So if you want to really tidy up your inventory purchasing processes, let the CMMS system handle what parts you're low on, but eventually you got to generate a requisition, and eventually that's going to have to go through a purchasing process. So that would be a good candidate of data that can be shared, and we've created interfaces like that, of course, many times. The pros and cons of those are obviously the pros are streamlined, streamline getting the data over into another system, eliminate data clerical entry errors, time to get it done. The cons, it's an interface. So interfaces are projects, and each project will have, they got to be treated like a project. So absolutely, when you're looking at a CMS system, you definitely want to make sure at minimum it has the capabilities of doing interfacing. I really think that when you're looking at interfaces, evaluate the CMMS system to model your business practices around inventory control, PMs, and so forth first, with an eye on an interface after you really get comfortable with that process, because you really want to work through it in the CMMS and then identify what are those key points of interface and what data should be shared and so on. But it's a project, and we are happy to discuss those in more detail. We'll get back to the person who put that out there.
Okay, great. And also, before I ask the next question, I did receive confirmation that your previous answer made sense, in case you were wondering. Okay, so the next question is, I've wanted a CMS system for years, but my boss can't get past the cost, saying it's too expensive. So what advice do you have, Paul?
Yeah, that's the question that I've been answering since I got started in CMMS, and I think it's easy for me to say because I'm not the one fighting for budget. I'm on the CMMS vendor side, but if you're looking at it as what is its cost, that's the first problem. You really need to look at what is its value, what is its ROI, and what is it going to save me. When you get into, take that asset lifecycle analysis example that I did earlier where we were evaluating the air handler unit and the boiler unit. Just think of if I can avoid buying a lemon that's going to have to be maintained extensively and expensively when it probably shouldn't have to, whether I go to a more proactive plan or I don't buy that asset again or I get a different contractor, that's going to save you money. There are so many use cases where a CMMS system is going to pay for its cost, in some cases, over and over and over again. And that's the return on investment. That's the value that it offers you. So, a lot of times, and I think at Dude Solutions we do a good job at this. If you engage in a conversation about what's this going to cost me, the salesperson you talk to is going to answer that question. They're going to show you a proposal, what it's going to cost you. But they're also going to make sure they arm you or invite your boss to talk about not just what it's going to cost you, but where it's going to save you money. Just another example is to increase your uptime. Move from a 90 to a 95% uptime. The cost savings alone right there, because everybody knows when their asset is down, it's costing them money. And the money it's costing them will greatly outweigh what it costs for a good proactive CMMS system to avoid that in the first place.
Okay, great. Somewhat similarly, the next question is, several members of my team are older and have been resistant to software in the past. I want the analysis, but how do I get my team to embrace these types of tools?
Yeah, that is a definite common scenario. The aging workforce, you see it described a lot of ways. I tell you that the best way I have found to get your team, and it really comes down to team buy-in. It's a cultural thing, and it's not nearly as hard to get team buy-in today as it was when I was starting this business several decades ago, when people wouldn't even consider letting their maintenance people have access to a computer or even crazier, a mobile device. But you got to get buy-in from the team. You got to make sure that I like when you go through the goals and objectives phase in that implementation phase when you're first getting to use Asset Essentials or your CMMS system, whatever you choose to use. You want to make sure that you don't just cram the software on your team. Parts clerk, like in this example here about the part storeroom's a mess and so on. You don't want to just cram software on these people. I'm a big believer in letting them be a part of that conversation. They don't have to drive. They don't have to define what you need to do, but you really need to listen what their needs are. Why is that storeroom a mess? I mean, would a barcoding strategy help? The fact that our system prints barcode labels out for you and helps you organize that, it's going to be a big help. So if you can involve them in the conversation and get buy-in, they're going to embrace it. And the key for getting good data, good metrics, is to make sure that there's good information going in the system, and that comes with buy-in from your users. So I'm a big believer in including them in the process in appropriate ways.
Okay, and I have a straightforward question here. Is this a web-based software that you have?
Yes, this is a true cloud, access from anywhere, both on a regular browser or also on mobile devices.
Okay, and before I ask our last question, I just want to let everyone know that any questions that were not addressed now will be sent to Dude Solutions and will be handled by a representative of the company, so you will be hearing from them. So our last question is, part of our problem is the part storeroom is a mess, which I think you referenced. Is it a lot of work to enter all of the parts, and will this help my staff organize that area better?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was blending two answers from my previous question. I apologize for that. Yeah, same answer. The part storeroom is a mess. Again, you got to come to analyze why is it a mess. Is it physically a mess? Well, physically a mess is not a good start. A lot of times people will coincide implementation of CMMS with organizing their spare parts room or really looking at how their spare parts room is organized, because you want to make sure inside your CMMS system that I can quickly look up a part, whether I scan that with a barcode reader or QR code on my mobile device or however I'm doing it. I can quickly find that part when I'm in the parts room. Printing off those barcode labels, printing off your count sheets that you can do, print off the count sheets for what, to help you organize when you're doing your physical count. Just having good organized information in your CMMS will really help you see and get that done. So again, you want to make sure that to organize that, it's going to come down to a fair amount of data entry. Fortunately, we've got all kinds of tools to help you replicate parts or import your parts lists if you have them in spreadsheets or previous CMMS systems, and use barcode scanning and so forth. But again, it just comes down to good inventory practices within the CMMS system, and that will naturally help you improve your inventory control, including how organized your spare parts room is.
Okay, and that concludes our webinar for today. Thank you everyone for attending, and a special thank you to Paul Lachance and Dude Solutions. Look out for an email with a link to access the webinar on demand within the next couple of days. Have a wonderful day.
Thanks, everybody.